It was the last thing I ever expected to happen, and yet, in some strange way, I should have known. The day my life unraveled, the day everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and loyalty came crashing down, started with something as simple as a text message. I'd been preparing for this day my whole life. Not the wedding day specifically, but the moment when I'd have everything figured out. I was the guy with a plan, the one who always knew where things were headed. I didn't need to wonder what the future held, because it was all laid out in front of me. Until that text, that fateful message that hit me like a slap across the face. It was an hour before I was supposed to be standing at the altar, about to marry the woman I had built my entire world around. My suit was pressed, the ceremony was about to begin, and the guests were trickling in. The flowers were arranged perfectly, the music was cued, everything seemed to be aligned. I was standing in the back room, pacing in front of the mirror, my mind on autopilot. That's when it came. My phone buzzed in my pocket. At first, I thought it was a reminder, something I'd set up for myself, maybe a final check before the vows. But no, it was her. Her name lit up the screen, Sophie. The one person I trusted more than anyone, the one person I thought was my everything. I unlocked the phone. It was a message, only 4 words. I can't do this. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. I read it over and over again, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, those words were crystal clear, etched into my mind as if they were written in ink I couldn't erase. I can't do this. That was it. The woman I was about to marry, the woman I'd spent months planning this life with, was pulling away. My fingers trembled as I typed, asking her what she meant, begging for an explanation. But before I could even send it, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was another message. Please forgive me. I stared at the words, waiting for something, anything. Nothing came. I sat there, numb, staring at the screen like a lifeline that was slipping away from me. How could this be happening? I tried calling her, over and over again, but each call went straight to voicemail. It was as though she had disappeared. My thoughts spiraled. I couldn't believe it. Not now. Not like this. I had planned this entire day, this entire future. My entire life was on the verge of becoming a wrecking ball, crashing through everything I thought I understood. I walked out into the main area, trying to gather myself. The officiant was waiting, guests were chatting quietly. Everyone was so sure that this was going to be the day I finally tied the knot. But I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. My best man, Jacob, noticed the look on my face. He came up to me, asking if everything was okay. I couldn't answer. I just stared at him, my mind racing for something to say. He saw the phone in my hand, the panic that was evident on my face, and then it clicked. "What happened?" he asked softly, the concern in his voice unmistakable. I could barely choke out the words. "She's not coming. She texted me. She can't do this." The moment I said it, I felt something break inside of me. The truth was undeniable now. The woman I was about to marry was gone, and I didn't even know why. Jacob seemed unsure of what to do next. But I was past the point of thinking rationally. I had to make a decision. I had to do something. This wasn't just going to be another awkward moment. This was my life. I wasn't about to stand there, humiliated, with nothing to show for it. Without thinking, I turned to the officiant, who was still waiting for instructions. I said, "We're not going through with this. She's not coming." He didn't flinch, didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if he had seen this kind of thing before. I walked to the front, my heart still pounding in my chest, my head spinning. The room was full of people. People who had been invited to witness my joy, my celebration of love. I wasn't about to let this be some sad, awkward failure. I had spent months arranging this day, and I wasn't going to let it be reduced to nothing. So, I did something that, in hindsight, was completely out of character. I grabbed the microphone and turned to face the room. There was a heavy silence that fell over the crowd, all eyes on me, waiting for what would come next. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice shaky but loud enough to be heard. "It seems we won't be having a wedding today. Sophie, well, she's not here. She can't do this, and I don't know why. But I want to thank you all for coming. We'll be turning this into something else." The crowd looked stunned. My friends exchanged confused glances. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I'm not some tragic figure standing here alone. Instead, we're going to make this into a celebration. A celebration of survival. A celebration of moving on, even when things fall apart. I heard a couple of people murmur. But then, to my surprise, some of them actually started clapping. It wasn't much, but it was enough to break the tension. I wasn't sure what I was doing at that point, but I wasn't about to let this day become a stain on my life. If she wasn't going to show up, then I'd make sure to turn this into something else entirely. It was my choice, and I wasn't going to let it ruin me. The first few minutes after I made the announcement were surreal. The guests were all still seated, staring at me in complete confusion. I could hear whispers, soft murmurs, people trying to figure out what had just happened. Some of them didn't even seem to understand why I had interrupted the ceremony. I could see my mom's face in the back, a mixture of worry and disappointment, but also a hint of concern. She wasn't sure what to do either. No one knew how to react. I stood there, feeling every pair of eyes on me, every second stretching into an eternity. I felt exposed, like I was standing on a stage where everything was falling apart, yet I couldn't look away. What could I say? How could I fix this? The silence was unbearable, so I forced myself to speak again. Look, I said, my voice trembling slightly but still determined. I don't know why Sophie didn't show up. I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is this. There's no use in pretending everything's okay when it's not. So we're going to make the best of this. I glanced over at the catering staff, who were standing off to the side, waiting for orders. They looked as confused as everyone else. But the moment I locked eyes with one of them, I saw a shift in their posture. They seemed ready to spring into action. That's when it hit me. The show must go on. I wasn't about to let this day end in complete disaster. I had to take charge, even if it felt like my world was crumbling. I looked back at the guests. Some of them still didn't know what to make of it, but a few of my friends were starting to stand up, clearly not wanting to be left in the awkwardness. Jacob was the first one to step forward. He had this grin on his face, though it was a little strained, as if he didn't quite know how to process what had just happened. But his support was enough. It gave me the courage I needed to keep moving forward. We're going to do this right, I continued, trying to channel some energy into my voice. We're going to eat, we're going to drink, and we're going to have a good time. This wasn't the day I envisioned, but that doesn't mean we can't make something out of it. I could feel the tension easing slightly. I motioned for the food to be served, and within moments, the staff began bringing out the dishes. People began to settle back into their seats, their murmurs growing louder, but it wasn't all bad. Some of them started laughing, others started asking questions, and a few were even checking their phones, perhaps trying to understand what was going on with Sophie. But I wasn't ready to sit back and let this become a pity party. I needed to be in control. I needed to be strong, even if inside, I was falling apart. The first few hours felt like a strange blur. I was talking to guests, making small talk, trying to act normal while all I could think about was Sophie. Where was she? Why had she left me like this? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the wedding, the life we were supposed to build together, was gone. And it wasn't just the loss of that future that hurt. It was the realization that I didn't even know who she really was anymore. How could someone who claimed to love me do something like this without even giving me a real reason? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had made the decision to keep going, and there was no turning back now. As the night wore on, I found myself talking to people I hadn't seen in years. Friends from high school, distant relatives, people who had no idea what had just happened. I think some of them were there for the free food and drinks, but I wasn't going to fault them for that. I didn't even know why I was still standing there, why I was still playing the host at my own non-wedding. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't let them see how badly I was hurting. That's when I saw her, Sophie's best friend, Carla. She walked in with a look of utter disbelief on her face, as if she was walking into a scene from some weird TV show. Her eyes scanned the room, and when she saw me, she didn't hesitate. She came straight toward me, her expression softening with sympathy. Daniel, I don't know what to say, she said, her voice barely audible above the noise of the party. I had never been one to show my emotions in public. I always kept things in check, but at that moment, seeing someone who knew Sophie and wasn't completely shocked by what was happening, I felt like the dam was about to burst. I clenched my fists, trying to keep the anger from bubbling over. She's gone, Carla, I said, my voice harsh. She left me without a word. Not a single explanation. How do you expect me to feel about that? Carla looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She's been struggling, Daniel. I didn't know how to tell you. She's been acting different for a while now. I felt a sharp sting in my chest. Different? That's all I got. A vague explanation from someone who had been close to her? What do you mean, different? I asked, my voice low, trying to control the rage that was threatening to overtake me. Carla hesitated before responding, almost as if she wasn't sure whether she should be saying any of this at all. She didn't want to hurt you. She thought it would be easier to disappear than to explain. Everything. Everything. My head was spinning. What did she mean by everything? Why couldn't she just tell me the truth? Why had she left me standing at the altar, humiliated and confused? Do you know where she is now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Carla shook her head, regret filling her eyes. I don't know. She's been distant for weeks. She didn't even want to talk about the wedding anymore. And that's when I realized this wasn't just some cold feet moment. Sophie wasn't running away because she was scared of commitment. She had been hiding something big. And if I was ever going to get the answers I needed, I wasn't going to get them from anyone in that room. I excused myself from Carla and stepped outside, into the cool night air. I needed space to think, to clear my mind. The evening had started to feel like a dream, like a weird, twisted nightmare. I needed to find Sophie. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. But little did I know, the real truth was darker than anything I could have imagined. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, trying to clear my head, but the questions just kept swirling. The gentle breeze did nothing to ease the storm raging inside me. Sophie's best friend, Carla, had just dropped a bombshell, but it didn't make any sense. Distant? Different? How could she keep something like this from me? We were supposed to get married today, for God's sake. She was the one I thought I could trust above anyone else, the one I had shared everything with. How could she be struggling with something for weeks, and I had no clue? I ran my hands through my hair, pacing in the quiet parking lot behind the chapel. It felt like the world was spinning too fast, and I was just stuck in the middle of it, unable to catch up. I glanced at my phone, still no messages from Sophie, no calls, nothing. What the hell was going on? I made my way to my car, not even thinking about where I was going. I just needed to drive, to get away from the chaos of the party. But before I could even start the engine, my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate to pick it up. The number was unfamiliar, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the message preview. I need to talk to you. It was from Sophie. I couldn't even breathe. I quickly opened the message, hoping for some kind of explanation, some reason why she had left me standing there at the altar. My thumb hovered over the screen as I read the next part. Please come to the old house. I'll explain everything. The old house. My stomach dropped. That was the place we had rented when we first started dating. The place we spent hours talking, dreaming, and planning our future. It had been one of the happiest times of my life. But it was also a place we hadn't visited in a long time, a place that held too many memories. And now, she wanted me to come there? After everything that had happened? I didn't even think twice. I started the car and drove off, not knowing what to expect, but feeling like I was finally going to get the answers I'd been desperate for. As I drove, my mind raced. What could she possibly want to say to me now? What had happened that I didn't know? Why didn't she just tell me the truth earlier? Each question felt like a weight pressing on my chest, and I had to force myself to focus on the road. I could hear the sound of the tires on the pavement, the rhythmic hum of the engine, but all I could think about was her. Her face, her voice, the last time I saw her smile. It felt like that version of Sophie had vanished, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The drive took longer than I expected. The house wasn't far from the chapel, but it felt like an eternity. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. Old, charming, but eerily silent. The windows were dark, and the porch light flickered faintly. I stopped the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever was waiting for me inside, but I had no choice. I wasn't about to turn back. I grabbed my phone and shot a quick message to Jacob, telling him I was heading to the old house to meet Sophie. He replied with a simple, "Be careful." I didn't know why, but those words gave me a strange sense of foreboding. What was I about to walk into? I stepped out of the car and made my way to the front door. It creaked slightly as I pushed it open. The familiar smell of old wood and dust hit me immediately, but it felt wrong. Something about the atmosphere was off. The house wasn't the same. It was as if it had aged, decayed in the months that had passed since we'd last been here. I took a step inside, calling out for Sophie. "Sophie, are you here?" The silence that answered felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but I pushed it aside. She had to be here. This was where she wanted me to come, after all. I stepped further into the house, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. The place looked untouched, except for the faint layer of dust that had gathered on the furniture. The living room was empty, the kitchen was quiet. I called her name again, but there was no reply. I turned to head up the stairs, but as I did, something caught my eye, something out of place. A piece of paper, half hidden under a chair. My heart skipped as I bent down to pick it up. It was a letter, hastily scribbled, the handwriting frantic. It was addressed to me. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Please understand, I never wanted to hurt you. I had to make this choice, and it wasn't easy. But I can't be the person you think I am. Please don't come looking for me. I've already made my decision. This is for the best. I felt the world tilt under me. I read the words again, my mind racing, but none of it made sense. What was she talking about? What decision? How could she just disappear, leave me hanging like this, without an explanation, without giving me a chance to understand? I stuffed the letter into my pocket and bolted up the stairs, my mind only focused on one thing: Sophie. She had to be here somewhere. I needed to see her. I needed answers. I made it to the top of the stairs and pushed open the door to the bedroom. The door creaked loudly, and when I stepped inside, I froze. The room was empty, but there was something in the air, something heavy, something wrong. The bed was made, the windows were open, and the faintest trace of perfume lingered in the air, but there was no sign of Sophie. Instead, I saw a strange object on the nightstand. A phone, a cheap, disposable one, its screen cracked. It looked out of place. I reached for it instinctively, my heart racing. What was this? Why was this here? And why did it feel like Sophie was deliberately hiding from me? I didn't know if I was ready for the answers I was about to uncover, but I couldn't back out now. The phone screen flickered on, and as I unlocked it, a string of messages appeared. They weren't from Sophie. They were from someone else, a man. I clicked on the first message, my breath catching in my throat. It's time, Sophie. You need to go. He's not the one for you. I read it again, my mind scrambling to process the words. What the hell was happening? What was she involved in? And then, the last message was the one that truly broke me. The wedding was just the beginning. You need to make sure he never finds out the truth. My blood ran cold. I could hardly breathe as I stared at the screen of the phone in my hands. The words blurred together, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The wedding was just the beginning. What did that mean? Who was she involved with? My heart thudded against my chest as I scrolled through the messages, each one more chilling than the last. There was no mention of love, no hint of the woman I thought I knew. It was all about secrets, plans, and him, the man she was communicating with. My mind raced, but I couldn't keep up. Who was this man? I thought back to all the moments I had shared with Sophie. I thought about the late-night talks, the times we laughed until we cried, the shared dreams of a future together. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. This phone, these messages, this was a side of Sophie I had never seen. A side of her I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I looked around the room, the silence pressing in on me. The old house that had once been filled with so much hope now felt like a cage. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by confusion. I quickly shoved the phone into my pocket and made my way to the door. I couldn't stay in this room any longer. There was a deeper layer to this story, something Sophie hadn't told me. I was determined to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant digging into places I wasn't sure I wanted to go. As I stepped back down the stairs, my mind was a whirlwind of questions, none of which I could answer. Why hadn't Sophie told me the truth? Why hadn't she come to me sooner if something was wrong? And most importantly, why had she just disappeared? The house was eerily quiet, and as I stepped out into the front yard, I saw something in the distance, something I hadn't noticed before. A black car was parked at the end of the driveway, hidden partially by some trees. My heart skipped a beat. Who could that be? I immediately walked toward the car, my pulse quickening. The closer I got, the more I could make out the details. It looked like an expensive vehicle, sleek and modern, but it didn't belong here. This wasn't the kind of car Sophie or I would drive. I had never seen it before. As I approached, I saw a figure leaning against the car, watching me. My body tensed. Was this the man from the messages? I couldn't tell from the distance, but I had a feeling I was about to come face to face with someone who held the answers I so desperately needed. I stopped a few feet away from him. The man was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his features sharp and unreadable. His eyes locked onto mine as if he had been expecting me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us felt thick, heavy, and it was as if the world had stopped spinning. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind running wild with possibilities. Daniel Harper, I assume. The man finally spoke, his voice smooth, too smooth. I nodded, trying to steady myself. Who are you? I asked, my voice rough with the weight of everything that had been building up. Where is Sophie? The man didn't immediately answer. Instead, he straightened up, pushing himself off the car and taking a step toward me. Sophie is. He began, but paused as if choosing his words carefully. Sophie is no longer your concern. My breath caught. I had to fight to keep my composure. What the hell do you mean? She's my fiancée. She's my concern. The man raised an eyebrow, unfazed by my outburst. Is she really? He took another step closer, and this time, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about him. His calmness, his confidence. It was as if he wasn't afraid of anything. Not me, not Sophie, not the situation. I couldn't help but feel out of my depth. Who are you? Why are you here? The man smiled faintly, as if enjoying the game. Let's just say I'm someone who knows things. Things that Sophie doesn't want you to know. I felt a rush of anger mixed with confusion. What are you talking about? Why didn't she just tell me? Why leave me like this, at the altar, with no explanation? The man's smile faded, and his eyes darkened. Because Sophie isn't who you think she is. And she's made some unfortunate choices. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach. What kind of choices? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man didn't answer right away. He glanced over his shoulder toward the house before turning back to face me. Do you remember the name Nathan Gray? Nathan Gray. The name echoed in my mind like a bell ringing in a distant tunnel. It felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. My confusion deepened, and I shook my head. I don't know that name. Why does it matter? The man's gaze narrowed, and he took a step closer. Nathan Gray is someone Sophie has been involved with. Someone dangerous. And you've been in the dark about it for too long. The words hit me like a physical blow. My knees nearly gave out, and I had to steady myself against the car. I wanted to ask more questions, but the answers I was receiving weren't adding up. What did this man mean by dangerous? Why was Sophie involved with him? And what had all of this disappearance, this secret life, been leading to? I forced myself to stand tall, trying to regain some semblance of control. What does he want with her? Why does she need to hide this from me? The man gave a small, almost pitying smile. She didn't want to hurt you, Daniel. But Nathan, he's been pulling the strings. Sophie didn't have a choice. She was in too deep. And now, you're involved whether you like it or not. I felt my blood run cold. The man's words were like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, but the picture they formed was one I didn't want to see. Sophie wasn't just hiding something from me. She was involved in something far bigger and far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. And now, I was tangled up in it too. Before I could ask another question, the man turned and began walking back toward his car. You'll find out more soon enough. But be careful, Daniel. There are people who won't hesitate to make sure you never uncover the truth. And just like that, he was gone. The car sped off down the road, leaving me standing there in the quiet night, my mind reeling with the realization that my life had just been turned upside down. I had been living a lie, and the truth, whatever it was more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. The car's taillights disappeared into the distance, and I stood there, staring after it, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Nathan Gray, Sophie, the man with the expensive suit. None of it made sense, yet everything in my gut screamed that it was connected. Sophie had been hiding something from me, something dark, something dangerous. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't walk away and pretend like I hadn't just been given a glimpse into a world I knew nothing about. I slowly turned back toward the house, my mind spinning. The quiet surroundings felt suffocating now. This was no longer the place I had shared so many memories with Sophie. This was where everything had started to unravel, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to put the pieces back together. I pulled the phone from my pocket again, my hands shaking slightly as I unlocked it. My first instinct was to call Sophie, but I stopped myself. I couldn't keep chasing after her, Couldn't keep pleading with someone who had been keeping secrets from me. No, this time I needed answers. Answers from someone who knew what was really going on. I scrolled through the messages again, focusing on the ones from the man. Sophie isn't who you think she is, he'd said. The words echoed in my mind, a constant drumbeat, but I couldn't grasp the full weight of them. Was Sophie truly involved with Nathan Gray? Who the hell was Nathan Gray, and why was this stranger so confident in telling me that she was in too deep? I had no choice but to find out more. I couldn't sit idly by, waiting for Sophie to come back and explain herself. I couldn't be a passive observer while my life was being ripped apart. No, this time, I was going to take control. I dialed Jacob's number, trying to steady my breath. My fingers trembled as I waited for him to pick up. Hey man, Jacob's voice crackled through the speaker. You okay? What's going on? You didn't text me back after you left the party. I didn't have time to explain everything. Not yet. I need your help, I said quickly. I'm at the old house, and I found something. Sophie's been hiding something. Something big. I need you to help me figure out who Nathan Gray is. There was a long pause on the other end, a beat of silence where I could almost hear Jacob processing the information. Wait, Nathan Gray? Who the hell is that? I don't know. I muttered, my voice tight. But the guy who showed up earlier, the one who told me about Sophie, mentioned him. He said she's involved with him. That's all I know. And right now, I need you to look into it. I need to know everything about him. Whatever you can find. Jacob let out a long sigh. You sure about this, man? I mean, what if Sophie's just in over her head with some sketchy people? But this doesn't sound like something you want to get mixed up in. If there's some serious stuff going on, you gotta be careful. I don't care. I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. She left me at the altar, Jacob. She's hiding something from me, and I need to know what it is. Jacob was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll start looking into it now. Just take care of yourself, okay? Don't do anything stupid. I won't, I lied. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Sophie had just been a figment of the person I thought I knew. But now, the more I uncovered, the more I realized that my entire relationship with her had been built on lies. The woman I had trusted with my future had been keeping secrets from me, and now those secrets were threatening to tear everything apart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being dragged into something much bigger than me. Nathan Gray, the mysterious man, the stranger who had appeared in my life out of nowhere. Everything about this situation screamed danger. But Sophie hadn't just disappeared. She'd left me with nothing but questions and half-finished answers. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, only to find a shadow moving across the yard. It wasn't just the wind, it was someone. A figure was standing there, barely visible in the dim light. My breath caught. Was it Sophie? Had she come back? I couldn't tell who it was, but something in my gut told me that I wasn't alone. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. I took a step forward, my eyes narrowing as I tried to make out any details. Was it the man in the suit? Had he followed me here? I took a few more steps, my heart pounding in my chest, but the figure didn't budge. I called out, my voice shaking. Who's there? There was no response. The figure just stood motionless, cloaked in the darkness, as if daring me to come closer. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn and run, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had to know what was happening. I moved cautiously toward the figure, my steps slow and deliberate. As I got closer, I saw that the figure was holding something in their hands. My breath caught. Was it a weapon? A phone? Was this a threat? Just as I was about to close the gap between us, the figure stepped back into the shadows, disappearing just as quickly as it had appeared. The chill of the night seemed to follow it, a cold wave crashing over me. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what had just happened. But I knew one thing for sure. The deeper I got into this mess, the more dangerous it became. Sophie's secrets, Nathan Gray, and now this mysterious figure. It was all connected, and I was at the center of it. I needed to get answers, and I needed them fast. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that the truth was going to cost me. And it wasn't going to be easy to find. I stood there in the yard, staring into the shadows where the figure had disappeared. My mind raced with 1,000 questions, each one more troubling than the last. Who was that? Was it the same man I had spoken to earlier, or was it someone else entirely? And why had they been watching me? The cold night air wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. But the chill I felt had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't alone in this anymore, that someone, or something, was lurking just out of sight, waiting to pounce. I could feel my pulse in my throat, each beat pounding louder than the next. I wanted to run back into the house, lock the doors, and forget everything that had just happened, but I knew I couldn't. I had come too far to turn back now. If I walked away, I would be running from the truth. I wasn't going to do that. I turned around, my heart still pounding in my chest, and walked back toward the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the trees felt amplified, like the world had become suddenly too big, too overwhelming. I needed answers, and no one was going to give them to me. Not Sophie, not the man in the suit. No one. Inside the house, the silence was deafening. I stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. There had to be something here, something that could help me make sense of all this. Sophie had been hiding something from me, something she was willing to risk everything for. I needed to find out what it was. I walked up the stairs, my footsteps heavy on the old wood, the air feeling even colder as I ascended. The bedroom door was still slightly ajar, the room beyond dark and silent. I pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The room seemed unchanged, but there was something about it that felt off. The air felt thick, as though the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I moved to the nightstand, where I had found the phone earlier. I needed to go through it more thoroughly. Maybe there was something I had missed. Maybe there was more hidden in those messages. I picked up the phone again, the cold metal feeling like a weight in my hands. I unlocked it once more, scanning through the messages. This time, I focused more carefully. The previous messages from the man in the suit seemed to have one thing in common: control. It was clear now that Sophie wasn't just involved with Nathan Gray. She had been forced into something that had gotten way out of hand. I clicked on the next message, my eyes scanning the words. It was from a different contact, someone named Alex. The message read, "Get out while you still can, Sophie. Nathan's already making his moves. It's too late to back out now." I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to process what I had just read. What had she gotten herself involved in? Who were these people? And why had Sophie been keeping this secret from me? I thought we shared everything. How could she have kept something this monumental from me, especially when it was clearly putting her in danger? The room seemed to close in around me, the weight of the realization pressing on my chest. I knew I had to confront her, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't even know where to begin. How could I confront her after everything that had happened? She wasn't just running from me. She was running from something far bigger than either of us. I stuffed the phone back into my pocket and ran my hand through my hair. The only thing I could do now was find out more about Nathan Gray. I needed to know what he wanted with Sophie, and I needed to understand why she had gotten involved with him in the first place. I turned and walked out of the room, heading back down the stairs. I knew it was time to leave the house and get some answers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floor beneath my feet, every rustle of the wind outside seemed to echo through the quiet house. There was something wrong here, something I hadn't yet understood, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I needed to talk to Jacob. I needed to get more information. Just as I reached the front door, I heard a knock. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it was enough to send a jolt of fear straight through me. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But something told me that this wasn't a random visitor. This wasn't just another knock from a lost delivery driver or a curious neighbor. I stood there for a moment, frozen, wondering whether I should answer. Then the knock came again, this time more insistent. There was no mistaking it now. Someone was here, and they were waiting for me. I swallowed hard and slowly walked toward the door, trying to steady my nerves. Whoever it was on the other side, they weren't just here to chat. I opened the door, my heart hammering in my chest. And standing there, in the dim light, was a woman. She was tall, with long dark hair, dressed in a long coat that barely shielded her from the cold. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. She didn't speak immediately, just stood there, studying me like I was some kind of puzzle she was trying to solve. "Are you Daniel Harper?" she asked, her voice low, almost calculated. I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. "Who are you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, and the faint smell of perfume reached my nose. It was familiar, something Sophie wore, something I had smelled before. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "You need to come with me," the woman said, her voice steady, almost urgent. I frowned, my mind racing. "Why? Who are you?" She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm someone who can help you find Sophie. But you need to follow me now. Time's running out." Something in her tone made my blood run cold. Whatever was going on, I knew it was getting far worse than I could have ever imagined. And I had no choice but to follow her. The woman's gaze was unyielding, her eyes cold, calculating. Something about her presence made my skin crawl, like she wasn't just a person standing in front of me, but a shadow from a nightmare I hadn't yet understood. She wasn't giving me a choice, and that realization hit me like a brick. If I wanted to find Sophie, I had no choice but to follow her, no matter how suspicious the situation seemed. I hesitated, the weight of everything pressing on me. My thoughts were jumbled, clouded by the web of lies and secrets I had stumbled upon. Sophie had been hiding something from me, something involving Nathan Gray, and now, this woman had appeared out of nowhere, claiming she could help. But who was she? Why was she here? And why did I feel like I was about to make a deal with the devil? "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but even I could hear the doubt creeping in. She didn't answer immediately, just stepped aside, signaling for me to follow. "You'll find out soon enough," she replied. Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. It wasn't a comforting tone, it was a command, as if she expected me to obey without question. I could feel my pulse quicken. This was it. I was either about to walk into something I couldn't get out of, or I was going to uncover the truth about everything. Either way, I was already in too deep. I glanced back at the house, the place that had once felt so familiar, so safe. Now, it felt like a tomb, a place where everything I knew was crumbling apart. There was no going back. I turned and followed the woman, my steps hesitant at first, but growing steadier as I walked away from the house and into the unknown. She led me down the dark road that wound through the woods, the night air sharp and biting. Every step felt like a weight on my shoulders, every moment more oppressive than the last. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating, but I had no idea what to say. I wanted answers, but I didn't want to anger this woman. If she was truly connected to Sophie's disappearance, I needed to play my cards carefully. After what felt like an eternity, she stopped in front of an old, run-down building at the edge of town. The structure was barely standing, its windows cracked, its door hanging crookedly off its hinges. The place looked abandoned, like something out of a forgotten memory, and yet there was something about it that felt deliberate, like it was waiting for me, waiting for something to happen. "This is where we're going?" I asked, my voice low, the unease in my stomach rising to the surface. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Inside. Now." I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the building, trying to figure out what kind of game I was being pulled into. But she didn't wait for me to decide. She turned and pushed open the door, the rusted hinges screeching in protest as she stepped inside. I followed her, my mind racing with questions, but I kept my mouth shut. The inside of the building was dark, barely any light filtering through the grime-covered windows. The air was thick with dust, the floor creaking under every step we took. It smelled musty, like it hadn't been touched in years, but the woman moved with confidence, as though she had been here before. She led me through a narrow hallway and into a small, dimly lit room. The space was sparse, the only furniture being a table in the center of the room, surrounded by a few mismatched chairs. There were no windows, no decorations, just four walls and a cold, sterile atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The woman gestured for me to sit at the table. "Wait here." Before I could respond, she walked to the back of the room, disappearing through a door I hadn't noticed. I didn't know what I was supposed to be waiting for. Was she going to bring Sophie here? Was this some kind of trap? The silence pressed down on me, and I couldn't help but feel like I was a pawn in someone else's game. I looked around the room, my mind spinning. This place felt wrong, but I had no idea why. It was like I was being led deeper into a maze, and every turn only made me more lost. I had been told that I was going to find Sophie, but with each passing second, I felt farther from the truth. What had I walked into? What was this woman really after? The door creaked open again, and the woman stepped back into the room, her expression now a bit softer, though still distant. She had a folder in her hand, and as she sat down across from me, she slid it toward me. "This is for you," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. I didn't move at first. I stared at the folder, my mind a whirlwind of possibilities. What could be inside? More answers? More lies? Finally, I reached for it, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside, there were papers, documents, photographs, and something that looked like a map. The first photo I picked up was of Sophie. But it wasn't the Sophie I knew. In the picture, she was standing next to a man, Nathan Gray. They were in a dimly lit room, and Sophie looked different. There was no joy in her expression, no warmth in her eyes. She looked trapped, and Nathan Gray was standing too close to her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't the Sophie I had been with. This wasn't the woman I had known. Something had happened to her, something that I didn't understand, and I needed to know what it was. I flipped through the documents quickly, scanning the text. They were all related to some kind of operation, code names, dates, locations, and references to something called the network. I couldn't make sense of most of it, but one thing was clear. Sophie was involved in something far bigger than either of us had realized. She hadn't just disappeared. She had been drawn into this world, this shadowy underworld that I had never even known existed. The woman watched me as I skimmed through the papers, her gaze unreadable. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the papers down onto the table, my frustration boiling over. What the hell is all of this? I demanded. What's happening to Sophie? What is the network? The woman didn't flinch at my outburst. She simply looked at me, her eyes dark and serious. This is only the beginning, Daniel. If you want to find Sophie, if you want to understand what she's been caught up in, you need to trust me. But know this, there's no going back. The moment you step into this world, you're in it for good. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was already in too deep. There was no turning back now. But the question remained. Could I trust her? Could I trust anyone in this twisted web I had stumbled into? The answer, I realized, was a terrifying one. I had no choice. The weight of the woman's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to walk away from this darkness. But the truth was, I didn't have anywhere else to go. Sophie was somewhere out there, trapped in this world I didn't understand, and I had no choice but to follow this twisted path to find her. For a moment, silence stretched between us. I stared at the papers scattered across the table, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had just learned. But deep down, something inside me still refused to give up on Sophie. I couldn't leave her in the hands of people like Nathan Gray. I wouldn't. I'm in, I said, my voice steady despite the fear that had been gnawing at me. I'll do whatever it takes to get her back. But you have to help me. I'm not doing this alone. The woman didn't smile, but there was a flicker of approval in her eyes. You'll need more than just information. You'll need protection, and you'll need to move quickly. The longer you stay in the dark, the more dangerous this gets. She stood up, moving to the back of the room where a locker stood hidden behind a faded curtain. She opened it slowly, revealing a set of equipment, gadgets, weapons, a few items I didn't even recognize. She pulled out a small, sleek phone and handed it to me. This is your contact, she said. If you need anything at all, use it. But don't trust anyone else. The people involved in this, they're not what they seem. I nodded, tucking the phone into my jacket pocket. I could feel the adrenaline starting to pump through my veins. For the first time since all of this began, I felt a sense of clarity. I was in the middle of something bigger than I ever imagined, but I wasn't backing down. Where do I start? I asked, my voice hardening with determination. Start with what you know, she replied, her eyes sharp. Follow the money. Nathan Gray isn't just a criminal. He's connected to something far larger, something that's been operating under the radar for years. But you already know that Sophie's key. You need to find out what she knows, what she's learned. And when you do, you'll have the leverage you need to bring them down. I left the building that night with a sense of purpose, the chill of the evening air a stark contrast to the warmth in my chest. The fear had faded. I had a plan. And, more importantly, I had the clarity that had been missing for so long. Days turned into weeks, and the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place. With the help of the woman, who turned out to be a former ally of Sophie's, one who had been monitoring the underground network for years, I pieced together information, tracked down leads, and slowly closed in on Nathan Gray. The web he had woven was vast and complicated, but I was relentless. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. Not again. And then, one night, I found Sophie. She wasn't the woman I remembered. She was changed, her eyes haunted by things I couldn't fully understand. But she was alive, and she was ready to come home. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes when we finally came face to face. "I never wanted you involved in this." "You didn't have a choice, Sophie," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "But I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever." The moment we embraced, everything else seemed to fade away. The danger, the secrets, the fear. In that instant, it was just the two of us, standing there in the aftermath of everything that had come before. I knew there was still a long road ahead. We still had to face Nathan Gray and bring everything to light. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we had a fighting chance. We were together again, and together, we could face anything. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like we were finally on the right side of it.